They say you do not realize the moment your life changes until it is already behind you, breathing down your neck like some ghost of better days. But I remember the exact second mine shifted. It was a Tuesday, clear skies, mid-August, my almond latte still warm in my hand, and on the screen in front of me, a system I had helped build from the ground up started to twitch. Not crash, not fail, just twitch. Just enough to whisper, "Look closely, Naomi." My name is Naomi Ellison. I am 39 years old, born and raised in Peoria, Illinois, now living just outside of Chicago. I was the senior infrastructure strategist at WestCorr Transit Solutions for 18 years. That job was not just a title. It was my fingerprint on every truck that left a loading dock, every freight scanner in a warehouse, every shipment tracked to the second. I built their backbone. I made them billions, and they erased me. That morning started like any other. I woke up at 5:15, took my usual jog past the river. I liked the routine, the silence before the storm of alerts and dashboards. I logged into the diagnostics console by 6:05, still in my hoodie and running tights, coffee in one hand, stylus in the other. WestCorr ran 24-hour freight operations. It never slept. So every morning I checked heartbeat indicators across our 5 main grids: West, Central, Midwest, South, and Borderline. I knew them like my own pulse, but that day something was different. Small things at first. 3 warehouse nodes in Iowa showing invalid temperature data. A routing script in Michigan triggered at 3:42 a.m. by a non-existent user. A Port Authority request in Texas rerouted to nowhere. At first, I assumed a batch timing error, but then I looked deeper. Route logs showed traces of remote session IDs I did not recognize. A few keystrokes later, I realized someone was inside the system, inside my system. Now, I am not the kind of woman who panics easily. My job, for almost 2 decades, was to anticipate worst-case scenarios and prevent them before anyone above me even knew they existed. But this was not an accident. Someone was moving through the infrastructure like they had a map. Worse, they were rewriting permissions, slowly, quietly, line by line. They were trying to rewrite me out of it. My hands hovered above the keyboard as a sinking feeling crawled into my chest. I knew then, before the call came in, before the boardroom confrontation, before the humiliation, I knew I was about to be pushed out. WestCorr was worth over $4 billion. It moved everything from fresh produce to military-grade parts across 9 states. Our network had 0 downtime for over 7 years, and that was not magic. That was me. I had built something unshakable, and I knew every inch of its bones. So when those bones began to creak in unfamiliar ways, I did not need proof. My gut told me the truth. Someone on the inside had decided my time was up. Maybe it was political, maybe it was personal, but it was happening. I watched the cursor flicker on screen like a final heartbeat before a storm. For a moment, I just sat there, remembering the nights I spent in server rooms, freezing under fluorescent lights, the weekends I missed birthdays, weddings, even my own mother's retirement party. All for this company, all for a system they could trust, and now they were trying to take it without even asking. That kind of betrayal, it does not come with yelling or slam doors. It comes in quiet lines of code and half-truths whispered in conference rooms. I closed my eyes, took a breath. This was not the end. This was the warning shot, and I was not going to fight back with fists or fury. I was going to let the silence speak for me, because they had forgotten one thing. You do not just unplug someone like me. You do not wipe away 18 years of sweat and intellect and loyalty like deleting a line in a spreadsheet. The system knew me. It breathed when I told it to breathe, and I had built something into its core that not even the board knew about. A little heartbeat of my own, ticking quietly beneath all the layers. I never meant for it to be used. But now? Now I could feel it stirring. I did not need to touch a thing. All I had to do was walk away and let gravity do the rest. Most people think systems fail because of a hack or a flood or some technician flipping the wrong switch. But the truth is, most systems fail because of trust. Trust in people who did not earn it. Trust in shortcuts. And sometimes, trust in the idea that one person can be easily replaced. That is what they never understood about me. I was not just managing code, I was the code. I knew how it moved, how it breathed, where it struggled, and where it healed itself. After we were hit with ransomware in 2012, I saw what blind trust could do. It nearly brought WestCorr to its knees. We lost data, missed shipments, and paid out more than $4 million in penalties. It was chaos, and I knew then, if it ever happened again, I would not leave my future in the hands of people who only saw my value on a spreadsheet. So I built the Guardian. It started as a recovery protocol, just a clean framework to check system integrity in the event of an attack. But as I watched the company patch the holes with duct tape and hope, I realized something deeper. No one else understood what I did. No one else wanted to. I had written the architecture, the diagnostics, the AI-level auto-responses. I had carried the system through every outage, every expansion, every storm. If I disappeared one day, there would be no backup Naomi. So I gave the system something only I could provide, a living signature. The Guardian was never listed in any audit. It was not part of any compliance review. I embedded it deep in the back-end kernel, disguised as a legacy balancing process. It looked harmless, like a timer, but it was more than that, much more. The Guardian runs 1,942 independent checks every single day across every facility we owned. It monitors load weights, temperature control, security clearances, dispatch orders, and even employee shift verifications. But it does not just check them. It validates each one against a unique rhythm, mine. It responds to my keystroke timing. It recognizes my voice print through a daily encrypted call-in script. No one ever questioned why I logged in at the same time every morning, typing a strange set of inputs that looked like gibberish. To them, it was just Naomi being thorough. To me, it was the pulse of the system. Without that pulse, the whole network begins to lock itself down. At exactly 7:59 every morning, the Guardian waits. It gives me 30 seconds to complete the full pattern, just under 400 keystrokes and a 10-second voice match. If it does not receive both, it begins a gentle freeze. Not loud, not sudden. Just small pieces shutting off, one after the other. A scanner times out. A gate refuses to open. A truck never receives its dispatch. By 8:30, a dozen failures. By noon, hundreds. And by end of day, the entire logistical framework begins to shut itself in layers, like petals closing for the night. It was not sabotage. It was not revenge. It was insurance. You see, when you spend your life building something, you do not just walk away and hope the next person reads your notes. I had trained people. Yes, I had written documentation. But I also saw the turnover. I watched as people got promoted for saying the right things instead of doing the right work. I saw Marcus join last year, all charm and buzzwords, never once asking how our pre-routing verification worked or why our East Coast nodes needed manual intervention after heavy storms. They did not want knowledge. They wanted speed. But speed without roots is collapse. So I rooted the system in me. No one else ever knew the Guardian existed. Not even Derek, our former VP, who trusted me with budget and silence. I never told Vanessa in HR or our CISO or the quarterly auditors who nodded politely while skimming over risk assessments I had personally rebuilt from scratch. It was not meant to be a secret. It was meant to be a safeguard. Because I knew the day would come when the people above me would stop seeing my value and start seeing my salary. When they would choose lean efficiency over legacy experience. When they would look at a number and forget the person who made it possible. That day arrived, and I was ready. Not with rage, not with lawsuits, but with precision. The Guardian did not break anything. It just waited faithfully for the rhythm it had always known. And when that rhythm vanished, it simply did what it was designed to do: protect the system from unknown users. The irony was almost poetic. In trying to replace me, they triggered the one thing they never even knew was protecting them: a system that trusted only one person. And now, that person was gone. They say betrayal does not always come with a bang. Sometimes it walks in wearing polished shoes, holding a manila folder with your name misspelled on it. That morning, I was called into a leadership sync at exactly 7 a.m. sharp. No calendar invite, no warning. Just a 2-line email from Vanessa Grant, our Human Resources Director, saying she would like to connect in the executive conference room before the day got busy. I had a bad feeling the moment I saw it. The kind of feeling that coils in your stomach and whispers, "You already know." Still, I showed up on time, in a navy blazer with my laptop and a list of overnight system updates in hand, ready to talk about work. Silly me. The room was quiet. The coffee station was untouched. No meeting materials, no whiteboard notes, just Vanessa sitting calmly at the head of the long table, a folder in front of her, and next to her, Marcus Kells. Young, clean-cut, always smiling a little too hard. He was a consultant they had brought in 6 months ago to streamline operations across departments. I knew what that really meant. He had been sniffing around my team's processes for weeks, asking questions he did not understand the answers to, copying my playbooks like he could reverse engineer 18 years of instinct. I nodded at both of them and sat down. Vanessa folded her hands over the folder and said it like she had practiced it in front of a mirror. As part of WestCorr's new strategic direction, we are shifting into a more agile and innovation-focused model. This reorganization is designed to position us for long-term success. I did not interrupt. I had heard this script before. It always ends the same way. Your position, while valued, is no longer aligned with our forward-looking structure. We appreciate your years of dedication and commitment to WestCorr. She slid the folder across the table to me. My name was spelled Naomi. There was no plan for knowledge transfer, no request for a handoff, not even a mention of the systems I oversaw. It was as if they believed the infrastructure ran itself, as if it would keep breathing without me. I looked at Marcus. He did not meet my eyes. He was already thinking about how quickly he could change the admin passwords. "Thank you for being a loyal part of our journey," Vanessa added, like she was offering me a sticker after a dentist appointment. I opened the folder. 2 weeks of severance. No mention of extended access. No tech offboarding checklist. Not even a goodbye card. I wanted to laugh. After 18 years, they were showing me the door with less care than a broken office printer. I felt the heat rise in my chest, not from sadness, but from insult. The room was still silent, like they expected me to cry or plead or ask for an explanation. But I did none of that. I simply closed the folder, stood up, and said, "I understand." That was all. No begging, no fight. I did not give them the satisfaction, because the truth was, while they were sitting there thinking they had control, the system had already started its countdown. The Guardian had not been activated that morning, and I had no intention of activating it tomorrow. They thought they could remove me without consequence, without a ripple. But they had no idea how much they had just unplugged. I walked out of that room with my dignity intact and my eyes forward. No tears, no rage, just a quiet knowing that arrogance always costs something in the end. I made it to my car before the shock started to settle in. Not the shock of being let go. I had known for weeks that something was coming. It was the way they did it. So neat, so impersonal, like I was a line item in a budget report. No one had asked me about the legacy codebase. No one had asked me how we handled satellite node outages during storm season. They did not care about the data compression routines I had rebuilt from scratch. They did not want knowledge. They wanted silence. And that is exactly what they were going to get. I walked out of that building without protest. No words, no anger. Just quiet steps through glass doors that used to mean something to me. The halls were already unfamiliar, filled with fresh faces that never cared to learn what kept the lights on. No one looked up. No one stopped me. They had made their decision, and I had accepted it. But they forgot one thing. They forgot to revoke my legacy credentials. 18 years of trust does that to people. Somewhere along the way, they assumed I would just disappear, take my little folder, and fade into the background like a good employee. They assumed wrong. As I walked across the parking lot, I did not feel defeated. I felt strangely calm, not empty, just finished, like a chapter closing itself without needing my hand to turn the page. The morning sun hit the windshield of my car as I slid into the driver's seat. I sat there for a minute, breathing, not from shock, not from grief, but from clarity, because I knew something they did not. At exactly 8 o'clock the next morning, the Guardian would do what it was built to do. No alarms, no error messages, no sabotage, just silence. The kind of silence that makes people panic because they do not know where it is coming from. I drove home the long way, through neighborhoods I had not passed in years. I let the stillness of the streets clear my head. My phone buzzed a few times, probably coworkers who just got the news or calendar alerts reminding me of meetings I would no longer attend. I ignored them. I was done playing support for people who never once asked me how I was doing or what I needed to keep their empire running. When I got home, I hung my blazer on the back of the kitchen chair, changed into a sweater, and made a cup of chamomile tea. The house was quiet, peaceful. I liked that. Then I went into my study and turned on my private terminal. It had been years since I used that machine for anything serious, but today it greeted me like an old friend. The screen came to life in soft blue tones. The keyboard was warm under my fingers. I entered my credentials, then the encrypted code that unlocked my private diagnostic mirror, an invisible reflection of WestCorr's heartbeat that I had built years ago. It was not a control panel. I could not change anything from here, but I could see everything. The status of every node, every warehouse, every transport line, all pulsing in steady rhythm. For now, I leaned back in my chair, holding the mug close to my lips. My hands did not tremble. I was not afraid. I was not even angry anymore. I was just watching the final sequence begin. The Guardian was already awake, counting down. Its clock knew the time. It knew my rhythm. And when that rhythm failed to appear tomorrow morning at 7:59 a.m., it would begin to close its hands, gently but firmly. That was the design. That was always the design. Some people leave their jobs and send one final email or slam the door behind them. I left nothing behind but absence. That was more powerful than any words I could have said. They would learn that not everything can be replaced with a newer version or a cheaper hire. Some systems only know one voice. Some engines only respond to one key. And when that key goes missing, everything begins to shift. I did not have to interfere. I did not have to break a single rule. The Guardian was not illegal. It was not even hidden. It was just buried beneath the parts no one ever bothered to learn. It had lived there for over a decade, protecting the system while I protected the people who ignored its existence. Now the protection was gone, and the silence would speak louder than I ever could. So I sat there, watching, breathing, and waiting, not for revenge, not for redemption, just for the truth to reveal itself. And I knew it would. In less than 24 hours, they would realize what they had done. But by then, I would be long gone. By 8:06 a.m., the silence began to speak. It started in Ohio, where the first shipping manifests failed to sync with outbound orders. Then in Kansas, drone ports reported sealed bay doors, refusing to unlock for scheduled freight. By 8:11, warehouses in Indiana and Illinois saw their semi-autonomous trucks enter holding patterns with no dispatch commands. A soft panic spread through operations as system messages blinked, trying and failing to pull routing data. The lights were on, the machines were running, but nothing moved. The network was breathing, but directionless. No orders, no transfers, just digital stillness. By 8:17, produce sitting in refrigerated containers began to thaw. The ambient temperatures were rising due to climate control scripts failing to validate. And by 8:20, live shipments of pharmaceuticals stalled at weigh stations without clearance. It was not total collapse, at least not yet, but the gears had stopped turning, and that was all it took. Clients across 5 states began to call, one by one, their voices shifting from confusion to concern to fury. They wanted answers, they wanted explanations, and WestCorr had none. Marcus Kells, the man who smiled through my dismissal, was now the one answering phones and speaking in circles. He kept repeating words like temporary disruption, unexpected load behavior, and we are working closely with IT. But those words meant nothing, because this was not a glitch. This was not a server crash or a denial of service attack. It was something no one there understood. It was a system looking for someone who was no longer present. The problem was not technical. It was human. It was absence. My absence. The Guardian had no emotion. It did not punish or protest. It simply followed its last instruction: verify presence or begin to restrict access. That morning, it waited until 7:59 a.m., as it always did, and when no voice, no rhythm, no keystroke came, it quietly started sealing doors. Not physically, but functionally. It revoked authorizations one by one, refusing to validate commands from users it did not recognize. It did not erase data. It did not rewrite code. It simply refused to respond. And in a system that large, silence is not harmless. Silence is deadly. By 9 a.m., WestCorr's internal communication channels began to fill with flagged reports. Dispatchers in Memphis and Cleveland could not push updates. Fulfillment centers in St. Louis reported dozens of stuck orders, some of them high-priority medical equipment marked critical. Still, no one could explain what was happening. IT teams rebooted terminals. Managers double-checked firewalls. A few suggested it was a new kind of ransomware, but no demands had been made. No traceable intrusions, no malicious code, just rejection. Gateways refusing credentials. Scripts timing out. Paths grayed out in the system's own UI. It was not a hack. There was no one attacking them. No external force had broken through. It was simply the system responding to what it had been told for over a decade, that it needed confirmation every morning from the one person who designed it. And when it did not receive that confirmation, it did exactly what it was meant to do. It stopped listening, not loudly, not destructively, just completely, and no one knew where to begin. Somewhere around 10 a.m., I received my first call. Not from Marcus, but from a former colleague in Minnesota. She was panicked. She had heard rumors that the Midwest grid had locked itself, that backup credentials were failing. She asked softly, almost like she did not want to know if I might have any idea what was going on. I listened. I thanked her for reaching out, and I told her the truth. I do not know what they told you, I said, but they removed someone the system trusted, and now it is doing what it was trained to do. I did not offer help. I did not gloat. I simply ended the call and returned to my tea. The irony was that they had spent so much time planning for attacks, external threats, data breaches, competition. They built walls, ran drills, paid consultants to map vulnerabilities. But the one thing they never accounted for was what would happen if the architect simply left, if the heartbeat behind the walls stopped. The system never needed a wrench. It never needed a patch. It only needed silence. And now it had it. From my small home office, I watched everything unfold through an old diagnostic mirror I had tucked deep into the back end years ago. It was a silent observer, designed only to reflect, not control. It showed me the health of the system, the activity in each node, and the digital noise that flowed like veins through the body of WestCorr. But what I saw that morning was not noise. It was panic wrapped in confusion. frozen commands, rejected overrides, scanners blinking like they were lost in the dark. I did not feel satisfaction. I did not feel victory. I felt numb. For 18 years, I was the one who answered the phone when things broke. I fixed problems no one else could explain. I stayed up past midnight when Midwest hubs flooded or East Coast snowstorms shut down delivery routes. I worked on Christmas Eve. I skipped Thanksgiving dinners. I sat through layoffs, budget freezes, and 4 different CEOs. And through all of it, I kept the system breathing. It was not a job to me. It was a structure I had built with my own hands and mind. And this cold, careless ending was how they thanked me. I leaned back in my chair, wrapped my hands around the same mug I had used every morning since 2016, and stared at the screen as dispatch queues stacked up and autoloaders timed out. I had always known the day might come when I would be asked to leave. Nothing lasts forever in corporate America, but what broke me was not the exit. It was the way they did it. Like I was nothing. Like my years of service were just numbers on a page. As if they truly believed someone like Marcus could read a few manuals and replace me within a week. They never saw the heart of the system. They saw dashboards and uptime reports. They saw KPIs and shipping volumes. But I knew every weakness the system had because I had buried them. I had designed around them. They never once asked how we got from 93% delivery success to 99.6%. They just patted themselves on the back and passed the credit around. The people upstairs thought logistics was about trucks and boxes, but it was never about trucks. It was about precision, timing, and trust. And now that trust was gone. From my screen, I saw facilities blinking red, an automated signal for system lag and security holds. I watched operators manually entering codes that used to be automated. They were scrambling, guessing, restarting terminals, calling in backup teams. None of them knew that the system was not broken. It was simply waiting for the one person it had trusted every morning for over a decade. And that person had been escorted out with a folder, a fake smile, and no coffee. It was strange, watching it all fall apart without lifting a finger. My hands rested quietly on the edge of my desk. I was not typing. I was not tampering. I was not inside the system at all. And yet, the entire framework was gasping like a machine unplugged, not broken, just missing something vital, like a body that forgot how to breathe. They thought they could replace the brain, and the lungs would keep going. But now their empire was wheezing, and no one knew where the oxygen valve was. For a moment, I thought about sending a message. Just a single line? Something like, "You forgot the rhythm," but I did not. Because this was not about revenge. It was about reflection. I had given them everything, not just skill, but loyalty. Silence. Solutions. And they dismissed me like I was a file to be archived. Now they were seeing the result of their arrogance. Not because I made anything collapse, but because I stopped holding it up. So I kept watching. Not with anger, not with pride, just clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you stop chasing approval and start remembering your worth. They had built their empire on a foundation I created. And when they took me out, they never checked what else might come with me. Now they were learning the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the silence is not a threat. It is a consequence. By the second day, the chaos had spread further than they could contain. What started as a few missed shipments had turned into a domino effect. Contracts were slipping. Vendors were threatening to walk. Regional managers were sending reports filled with red flags and unanswered questions. No one could figure out why every temporary fix failed within hours. They were resetting systems, replacing hardware, escalating to outside consultants. But nothing stuck, because the issue was not technical. It was structural. It was the absence of something they had never respected until it was gone. That afternoon, my inbox chimed with a familiar name. Derek Molina. He had been my direct supervisor for almost 6 years and had seen firsthand how I held the company together through hurricanes, cyber attacks, and labor strikes. The subject line said only, "Can we talk?" No greeting, no preamble, just that. I stared at the screen for a moment, unsure how I felt. Derek was not the worst of them. He had even defended me once during a budget meeting when they tried to cut our infrastructure headcount. But he had also stood silently during my dismissal. I opened the message and read 3 sentences. Naomi, I am reaching out because things are not stabilizing. We are at a point where we need your insight. I want to understand what we missed. What they missed. I closed the email and walked away from the desk. I poured myself another cup of tea and looked out the window. The leaves were starting to turn. It was the first real sign that summer had ended. Fitting, because something else had ended too. Not just my time at WestCorr, my loyalty to it, my willingness to sacrifice for a system that never once returned the favor. By the evening, the first delivery came, a white box with silver trim and a printed card inside. White lilies, my favorite. Someone had done their homework. I opened the card. The message was typed, not handwritten. Clean, careful, distant. It read, "You were the spine. We realize that now. Please let us fix this." No name at the bottom. Just WestCorr executive team. That was the moment I smiled, not because I felt vindicated, but because it was too late. They had finally looked around and realized what had been holding them together. And it was no longer in the building. I did not respond. Instead, I pulled up an old contact I had saved under Asha T. Fed Infra. Asha Trent was a powerhouse, sharp, calm, and deeply respected in national logistics and transport systems. We had crossed paths years ago at a conference in Denver. After my panel, she came up to me and said, "You think like a systems architect, not a corporate engineer? You should build something of your own, Naomi. Stop holding theirs together." I remembered her words clearly because they hit me harder than I expected. I sent her a short message. "Asha, I believe the time has come. Are you still open to that conversation we left unfinished?" She replied within the hour. "Call me tomorrow. I have something that might be perfect for you." That was it. No flowers, no apologies, just opportunity. Real, grounded, and honest. As night settled in, I sat on my porch and let the cool air fill my lungs. I thought about all the nights I spent hunched over a keyboard, fixing things for people who did not even know my name. I thought about the sleepless weekends, the holidays I gave up, and the invisible weight I carried. And then I thought about the lilies on my kitchen counter. Beautiful, thoughtful, completely meaningless. They did not need flowers, they needed foresight, and they never had it. Now, the system was still breaking down, and all they could do was send gifts and call consultants who did not understand why everything was rejecting their inputs. But I was done. Done patching their holes. Done saving them from themselves. Because I finally realized something I should have understood long ago. My value was never in the seat they gave me. It was in everything I built while I was sitting in it. That night, with the city lights flickering beyond my window and the silence of my home office wrapping around me, I made a decision I'd been avoiding for years. I reached into my filing cabinet, pulled out an old envelope labeled Nova Grid, and opened the forgotten pieces of something I once dreamed of building for myself. Nova Grid Solutions, a transport systems consultancy I had registered nearly 7 years ago, but never activated. Back then, I thought I would get around to it when things slowed down. But things never slowed down, not until now. And suddenly I had all the time I needed. I opened my laptop, logged into the business registry portal, and began to file the paperwork to revive it. As I typed in my own name under owner and principal engineer, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Ownership. Not just of work, but of purpose. I was not building someone else's dream anymore. I was not fighting for a seat at a table I never helped set. This time, the table would be mine. No executive layers, no HR folders, no forced smiles. Just me, my code, and the quiet confidence of knowing exactly what I am capable of. By morning, the email confirmation started rolling in. State filing accepted, business bank account reactivated, domain secured. I stayed up most of the night sketching out the service lines. Disaster recovery planning, legacy system reinforcement, autonomous routing optimization. Real infrastructure work, not the kind of surface-level fluff I watched consultants sell for inflated prices. I wanted NovaGrid to stand for precision, security, and systems that were not just efficient, but human-proof, not dependent on constant oversight, not built to fall apart when one person left, systems that were whole, even in silence. 3 days later, I had my first inquiry. A Fortune 500 food distributor out of Texas had heard, through back channels, that I might be consulting again. They had read the news about WestCorr's disruption and wanted help with strengthening their cold chain logistics. I had not even published a website yet. The second inquiry came that afternoon from a former WestCorr vendor who had moved on years ago and now sat as a VP at a competing firm. He said simply, "You saved us once. We would like to pay you this time." The third was from a defense logistics contractor. Quiet, careful, with a signed NDA attached before the conversation even began. That one caught my attention. I took the meetings from my home office, hair tied up, no suit, no pretense. I spoke plainly, offered direct analysis, and named my price without apology. I did not lowball myself like I had for years in corporate meetings. I did not downplay my title to avoid making others uncomfortable. This time, I was not a cog in someone else's machine. I was the engine, and they could either respect it or keep walking. Most of them stayed. Not because I sold them something flashy, but because I spoke in systems that worked. And in an industry addicted to buzzwords and breakages, real structure was rare. NovaGrid began to take shape faster than I expected. I hired one assistant, someone I trusted from years ago, to handle scheduling and legal. No fancy office space, no teams I had to babysit, just clean contracts, secure work, and results that spoke for themselves. For the first time in my career, I felt like I was building something without someone looking over my shoulder, waiting to take credit for my labor, or water down my ideas in the name of company alignment. This time, it was mine. All of it. Every time I refreshed the NovaGrid dashboard, showing new inquiries and signed agreements, I felt a little more of myself return. Not the overworked version I had become, but the version I remembered from the early days, the builder, the thinker, the architect who had stayed up all night because she loved the challenge, not because someone demanded it. WestCorr had treated me like a replaceable part, but now I was proving that the work I did there was never about the company. It was about the mind behind the code. And now that mind was finally free. Back at WestCorr, the panic had shifted into something worse, confusion with no direction. Marcus and the internal audit team were drowning. The emergency calls had doubled overnight, with regional managers reporting complete stalls in core operations. Nothing was syncing. Backup protocols were unresponsive, and vendor systems were beginning to reject WestCorr's attempts at integration. It was not just a glitch anymore. It was paralysis. The system had stopped recognizing them. Every command, every override, every forced reboot was met with rejection. Not because something was broken, but because something was missing. They tried using clone credentials, but those expired every 12 hours, by design. I had implemented that feature after watching too many junior engineers pass login data across Slack channels like it was candy. It was meant to keep the system safe, but now it was working exactly as I intended, protecting itself from people who did not belong. They tried importing new admin profiles, but the Guardian had its own logic. It did not trust new titles or access tokens. It responded to rhythm, to presence, to a pattern it had listened for every morning for years, and that pattern was no longer there. Cloud access failed next. Marcus escalated to the regional IT director, who sent in a team to try and migrate command through a mirror server in Phoenix. But Guardian's biometric layers had been tied not to facial recognition or a key card, but to my typing cadence, my pressure on the keyboard, and my vocal signature embedded in an encrypted log. When the mirror server attempted to mimic it, the system flagged the entire attempt as a breach and shut off all external connections for security reasons. They thought they could outcode it. But this was not about code. This was about trust, and they had none left. The audit team requested a full system reset. They believed they could back up the data, reinstall the framework, and relaunch under a new structure. But they ran into a wall. The Guardian had been written into the core of the logic engine. It was not a layer on top. It was inside the bones of the system. Pulling it out would break every dependent process built around it. Restarting without it would collapse every time-based verification script. And even if they managed to rebuild it from scratch, they had no blueprint. Because I never wrote one. Not out of secrecy, but because it lived in my head, in my hands, in the thousands of decisions I made without fanfare. Marcus paced the hallway, eyes sunken from lack of sleep, voice hoarse from back-to-back calls. He tried to speak confidently during an emergency leadership meeting, but even his words began to falter. We believe this was an unintended consequence of an undocumented security layer. But they all knew, no matter how carefully he worded it, the truth was plain. They had cut out the architect, and the building was sinking. The very system they praised for years had not turned against them. It had simply stopped listening, because its only key was gone. I received a message from a former junior engineer that afternoon. She said, "They are blaming the code, but I remember the Guardian. I remember you testing it at night when no one else was watching. They never asked how it worked. They just used it." That message stayed with me, because it reminded me why I had built it that way in the first place. Not for revenge, not even for protection. But because I knew one day they might forget that the system was not magic. It was human effort. It was care. And once that care left, everything else would follow. They could not shut it down. They could not reboot it. They could not replace it. Because the key was never a password, never a line of code. It was a rhythm, mine, and it was gone. Now all they could do was watch the system they depended on tighten its grip around them. Not because it hated them, but because it had been trained to trust only one person. And that trust had walked out the door, with no intention of ever coming back. 3 months later, the headlines told the story for me. WestCorr Transit Solutions filed for emergency restructuring after what the press called an extended and unexplained logistics failure. Investors pulled out. Supply chain contracts were terminated or transferred. Warehouses were shuttered or sold off. Clients who once signed 5-year deals began canceling within weeks of each other. Some of those clients had already come knocking on my door, looking for help through NovaGrid. I did not chase them. I did not advertise. I just kept building. Quietly, steadily, purposefully. Their final emails were still sitting in my inbox, unread. Derek sent one titled "Final Attempt to Connect." Marcus sent one with no subject line at all. Someone in their legal department had tried to reach out with a vague offer to discuss transition cooperation, but by then there was nothing to transition. The Guardian had completed its work, not in chaos, but in clarity, not in destruction, but in the absence of presence. The system had done exactly what it was built to do, wait for someone who would never return. And the company learned too late that legacy cannot be replicated in a hurry, no matter how many consultants you bring into the room. I never responded to any of them, not out of spite, but out of principle, because I had already left that building long before they asked me to pack up my desk. My real exit happened the day they stopped valuing what I gave them, the day they smiled across the table and told me my role no longer aligned with their future. That was when I let go. The folder, the flowers, the calls, they were all too little, too late. My loyalty had been spent, and in its place, I had planted something better. Something mine. NovaGrid was growing faster than I could have imagined. I had signed a multi-year deal with the defense logistics firm I spoke to in those early days. My work with the food distributor expanded into cold chain analytics for two of their competitors. The name Naomi Ellison was beginning to circulate through networks that used to ignore me completely. But I did not chase fame. I did not chase recognition. I focused on the work, the systems, the structure, because I knew what it felt like to give everything to someone else's vision and be discarded like a used part, and I was never going to let that happen again. Sometimes people expect revenge to be loud. They picture public takedowns, angry speeches, lawsuits, or slamming doors. But what they do not realize is that the most powerful revenge is quiet. It does not need an audience. It does not need permission. Sometimes revenge is simply never looking back. It is waking up every morning and doing what they said you could not. It is building something unshakable from the pieces they overlooked. It is not proving them wrong. It is proving yourself right. I still pass the old WestCorr facility sometimes when I drive into the city. The lights are dimmer now. Fewer trucks. The name is still on the building, but the pride is gone. It feels hollow, like a shell of something that once mattered. I do not stop. I do not stare. I just nod once, like you do when you see something that taught you a hard lesson. Then I keep driving, because I have work to do. Real work, honest work, work that belongs to me and no one else. I have a name I built with my own hands, a company that respects my boundaries, and a future that is finally mine to shape. No middlemen, no layers of approval, just clean lines, clear contracts, and the peace that comes from knowing I walked away on my own terms. They never saw it coming because they thought I would always stay. They thought people like me would always wait to be chosen. But I stopped waiting the moment I realized I was never the support. I was the foundation. And now I have no intention of holding up anything that does not honor that.